Welcome back to the green carpet, the Bolinda green carpet at VALA 2016. And now we're going to have a bit of just an informal getting to know you session with the keynotes. This is where we find out a little bit about what makes them tick. I can tell that they're all really enjoying sitting up here like this. They're feeling really relaxed. I've already been given a bit of stick about my accent and my inability to be understood, so I'm going to talk very slowly. I did also point out the fact that there was a bunch of Australians in the audience who spoke worse than me, so, you know. And that's a good controversial way to start, I know. So, we've had 2 keynotes already, and I think we can all agree that they've been fantastic and really interesting. Tomorrow, we're going to be having 5-minute discussions, which I'm calling 5 minutes on, where we'll talk in a wee bit more in depth about some different topics. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity just to actually do a bit of a getting to know you and ask each of the keynotes in turn why you do what you do. So let's start with you, David.
Hello. Why do I do what I do? Well, one, I'm a professor, and there's no better job than being a professor. You get to work with smart students, people who really want to change the world, and that's the sort of political answer. The larger, of course, is that I get to come here to really cool places and see things around the world. But really, I think I do what I do because I sincerely want to make a better place for my kids, and I do that through education and teaching and working with people who also want to make positive change.
And I think, you know, everybody can see the passion that you bring to your, I mean, I've seen 2 keynotes from you now in 6 months.
Yes.
And both of them have, I suppose, been marked by that passion that you bring, that when you start talking in depth about the things that you actually really believe in. All right, Kevin.
I'm going to go with the selfish answer and say because I like the challenge of it. I'm a developer by training, and it was the problem solving that I enjoyed tremendously, but it's the warmth and the glow you get from working in the cultural heritage sector that keeps me here. I could go off and do development and data modeling and a number of other fields, but working in the library sector, these are my people.
And supplementary question. So what goes through your mind when you get an email or a telephone call or whatever it is and somebody says, we'd like you to come to Australia to talk about what you do?
What went through my mind was me, honestly. I was flattered. I was delighted. I think it's fantastic that anyone would love to know what I do and how I do it, and I'm delighted to share it. I was just tickled.
Cool, thank you. Corin.
Well, I like to have fun, so I look for ways to have fun with the people around me and make meaning together. I think that's really important. We have a short time here, it's our only time here, so making connections, finding out what's important to people, finding out ways to support them, that brings me a lot of satisfaction, and I find it really fun.
Cool, and if I issue the same supplementary question?
I was delighted. Also, I was like, is this the right email address? It's very exciting to be here. I'm absolutely thrilled. I've learned a lot already after one day. And I hope that this will be an opportunity to make meaning together and have a good time together.
Excellent, thank you. And Nancy.
Well, I think I'd have to say luck is what brought me into my career. With the exception of the period when I was putting myself through school and I worked any job I could get to pay the bills, I've been lucky enough to just do whatever seemed the most interesting option in front of me, and it led me to museums very much by chance. And I've stayed because of the community. It's just such an incredible group of people, so generous, so smart, so innovative, and just interesting. And that's really what's kept me there. But I do also just love visiting museums. I mean, I do that on my time off. I do it for professional reasons. So it's just a lot of fun. The question was, do they let me in free? Sometimes, but the main key to getting in free is an ICOM card. Professional tip.
And so what was your reaction when you got the invite to come?
Oh, I was thrilled, but I'll have to confess, I do have a young family, so there's always being torn between the great opportunity to get to come here and see a place that I don't get to see very often. And I mean, Melbourne in particular is such a hotbed for the leading edge of museum practice right now. It's a fantastic opportunity to get to connect with some colleagues and speak to them and learn from the library community here as well. But it's tough being away, so that's okay.
Thank you. Valentine.
Yeah, so I started by studying history. I hated computer, and then somehow I became a metadata geek, and then going into all these data modeling things, which I never expected to do. So that was kind of a surprise. And but doing it at Europeana, which is a great European project, when you have a passion for culture and working with all the countries in Europe, with people with various backgrounds, with different languages, it's really exciting. So it's a great place to be. So yeah.
Yep. And what was your reaction when you got the invitation?
Yeah, well, I was really happy. It was like a great opportunity to visit for the first time in Australia. The thing is, in between, I got another invitation to go to Australia. So then I had the chance to go to visit Australia in winter and in summer in less than 6 months. So that was pretty nice. I guess it will be the last time now, but so I will enjoy it very much.
You never know.
Yeah.
And lastly.
Well, I feel like the luckiest person in the world. I used to be a journalist, and when I got this job, I discovered that it's covering the biggest story of our time. The rise of the internet, the internet broadband revolution, the mobile revolution, the social networking revolution, and soon to be the Internet of Things revolution. What social scientist, what journalist gets to cover perpetual revolutions in that short a time span? And so I'm thrilled to wake up every morning and try to discover what's next on the horizon.
Cool. And your reaction when?
Well, the best part of my best of all possible jobs is the surprises that come with it. Who becomes interested in the information, where the information has resonance and purchase. And so it is one of those wonderful, delightful, and now ceaseless surprises that came into my life, and I was thrilled with it.
And I mean, it strikes me as it must be interesting working with information about a profession that deals with information.
Oh, I'm the most postmodern man in the history of it. I study myself. It's like navel gazing for a pretty decent salary.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. So, David, I appreciated your nod to the singing at Leanne's conference. What's that like for you, as somebody looking in?
Oh, it was extremely awkward and wonderful at the same time when you have a whole audience singing at you, and it was really one of the, to risk being serious for a moment. One of the fabulous things when, come to Australia, yes. Come to New Zealand, yes. Because you come and it's just, you don't understand a world until you get there. One of the things that I've learned very quickly is that different parts of the world appear as sort of a two-dimensional picture, because all you hear about is either someone sick or some conflict or some election. And when you go and people sing to you, or when you go and people have Chinese New Year. I mean, Chinese New Year in the United States, not quite the same thing. I mean, for the past week, it's been amazing. And so coming and learning and hearing, I walk back just so enriched. I mean, I get to talk at people, but most of the time I'm sitting listening and learning. So it's wonderful.
Thank you. And I enjoyed the Twickle commentary. I was a bit worried when you had a slide up that said people trust libraries, and I was waiting for David at some point to jump up and go, no, people trust librarians. But I think both of those talks today and of the first two keynotes have been fantastic explorations of different parts of things that are really relevant to us and the stuff that we need to be talking about. So thank you very much for that. I wonder, and this is putting you on the spot, all of you on the spot a wee bit, so you can start wherever you like, whether if there was, so you've all come from other places, so you have an opportunity with primarily a bunch of Australians and New Zealanders to give them or leave them with something that you would want to say to them. What would you say? That's deeply cruel, I know. Deeply, deeply cruel.
I would have to say that you together can do something. You don't need to look across an ocean or to another continent in order to do something. You guys have the skill and the talent and the knowledge and the passion to do it here. And I'm saying that from coming in, and I'll be talking about BibFrame, and that's coming out of the Library of Congress back in Washington, D.C. But one of the questions I've been asking myself leading up to this is, why couldn't the Australians do it themselves? Why couldn't the South Pacific do it themselves? So the conclusion I'm coming is, you could. You are more than capable.
And I think, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we live in an increasingly small world. And in fact, all of this stuff can actually be done globally. And there's enormous power in doing that and thinking in that collective space rather than individually.
I guess that would be my thing, is that I think we are right now, Lee talked about the continuous revolution, but I think this is a old term, inflection moment, where we have the ability as a library community and librarians to make a change at a very local level by embracing our communities and changing, at a national level by talking about the importance and role we can play in everything from government to major issues, but at a global level. I go, and when I talk to librarians, the folks in the UK are learning from what's going on in Australia, and the folks in Belgium are learning from Americans, and we have this currency that we can pull on. We can take all the credit that Library of Congress built up and said, look, we can build on that work here, and we have this is a time where libraries can truly become ascendant. We're not, in this weird position. We're past the internet's going to do away with you and doom and gloom, and we're at a point now where we really get to push the agenda of what we can be moving forward. And I think that's so my message would be, you are empowered to do that. This is the time.
Okay. I'll go with two ideas. The first is the principle of improvisation of yes and. You were saying yes. Australia, yes. So thinking about what librarians can say yes to and add on to, where those opportunities are for entrepreneurial thinking and innovation. And I would argue that they're probably in community engagement, which is now such an important movement in Australia that I think is really exciting. And the second thing I would say is this idea of empathy, not just for the people who come in to the library and use your services, not just your community, but among one another. There's so much emphasis on the future and the scary future and what's going to happen in the future, and are we relevant in the future? And I think it's really important to step back and think about, well, what's happening right now between us in this conversation? What's happening in this moment? What can we do right now in terms of making and process that will alleviate some of the anxiety about future worry, which is very sort of think-based, and bring us into the present for a more making-based experience together?
Following on from that, do you think we spend too much time worrying and not enough time actually doing?
VALA sent me a list of questions to help me prepare for the keynote, which I was very thankful for. And one of the questions at the end of this long paragraph of things I could potentially cover was, are we our own worst enemies? And, I think that gets back to empathy. Yeah.
I think I might need you to tell me what the question was again. I've ended up on so many interesting tangents as a result of what you all have said.
So the general question was, if there was one thing that you wanted to impart to the people here who live on the other side of the world from where you live, what would you want to leave them with?
So me impart to the people here.
Or indeed to the entire world, because this will be on YouTube and, you know.
Yeah, oh Lord, no pressure. Honestly, I mainly came to learn from you all. But I guess just in response to something Corin just said, I was thinking about this question of, are we our own worst enemies? And I think one of the challenges for human beings individually, but also collectively when we form institutions, is that we are extremely bad at judging risk. You know, really how dangerous is something, how likely is something to happen. And I think we might need to find some better ways to determine risk, to do risk assessment other than our guts, because our guts are usually wrong and they usually hold us back. So that's perhaps one area I've been thinking about, and also really inspired by what Lee said about leap of faith, that there's some times when you just have to make a leap of faith. It doesn't have to be without a harness, it doesn't have to be ill-informed or ill-advised, but sometimes you do just have to jump.
And I mean, you know, that point about that you just came here to learn, I mean, I think that's a really interesting and important thing for us to remember, that, you know, whether you are attending a conference or even if you're the keynote, actually you're as much learning through the process and the conversations and the interactions, which is very much what you were saying as well. And that's actually part of the beauty that comes from things like this.
Oh yeah, when I was a grad student, I had the good fortune to be allowed to teach, and I've had a few occasions to teach since then, and I've never learned as much as I have while teaching. It's the most beautiful experience, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Well, maybe what I want to say, so I'm quite happy the European experience has inspired a lot of other countries in the world, and I would say now maybe would be the time for us to get inspired by what people will build out of the European experience. So now we have inspired we have inspired you, so now it's your time to inspire us to build new things and to try to improve what we have done so far. I also know that culture is at threat in many countries because of the budget crisis, etc. But on the other hand, it's now that it's really the time to continue working with culture, because, you know, with the refugee crisis and all these kind of events, culture is really important. It's what brings us together. So I would raise the importance of all those projects we are working on in this context and try to not diminish our efforts because of all these economic, financial issues, and try to stand for what we believed in. And I think it's quite important. So, yeah.
Cool. And I mean, again, I think we have a lot to learn from, I mean, so Europeana, I mean, you've got yes, it's Europe, but you've got many cultures, many countries who are working together for collective aims and agreement, and there's things to learn from that in terms of the way that we can work in a global sense as well.
So yeah, it's the sense of community and working together, and also understanding a bit better what are the benefits of that. So I liked in your talk, David, about the impact and how to measure impact, because Europeana is a project at threat because we are running out of funding, and so we are trying to find a way to express how we can make impact on the economy, and also part of this impact is difficult to measure because it's about passions, values, things that are difficult to express, but we have to try to find ways to express this and make it more visible. And I guess event like this, in a way, is part of it. Yeah.
Thank you. And last, Lee.
I'd follow on to my last slide, be not afraid. One of the reasons that people like us get invited to conferences like this is that people like them think we have the keys to the kingdom, that there is a playbook, that somebody knows that if they just implement each tab of the playbook, they'll be in digital nirvana. And my favorite story about why that's not so is from the very first Web 2.0 conference, around 2006 or 7. John Battelle, the originator of the idea of Web 2.0, his final speaker at the conference was Mark Zuckerberg, pre-IPO Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook. And they had created this elaborate diagram, a map, that was meant to be the cartography of the tech world. And each continent and each body of water had a company name on it. And so Intel was next to Microsoft, was next to Facebook, was next to Apple, and everything on the map was named. And they were so proud of the map, it was up for the whole conference, and they invite Zuckerberg out to just have a couch conversation as the final act of the conference. And Battelle, very proud of himself, says, "What do you think of our map?" And Zuckerberg turns around, looks at the map slide behind him, and says, "Your map is wrong." Battelle is crushed. They worked so hard on it. They tried to get everything aligned just right. And he said, "Why do you say that?" And Zuckerberg says, "Because my map of the world, it would be 90% uncharted. I don't wake up in the morning thinking how other companies are going to kill me that I know. I wake up in the morning thinking about a kid who's behind a plow in Zimbabwe or Bangladesh who's going to eat my business." And so you can't anticipate the world to come, and I certainly don't know the world to come.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for being so brave in terms of sitting up here in front, because I know that's not necessarily a common experience at conferences. It's one thing to stand up and do your keynote. It's another thing for somebody to put you on the stage and then ask you random questions like, what's the one thing? So Kevin, Valentine, Lee, Nancy, David, and Karen, thank you very much. Thank you to the two keynotes who have spoken already, and thank you in advance to the rest of you. We're looking forward to the next couple of days. Cool.
Thanks.